Have you ever wondered about the full life history of Uncle Iroh? Well then, stay tuned as I fill in the gaps. Hey family members, I'm McGann, and welcome back to another Avatar theory on the Fangirl. Now, if you ask any Avatar fan who their favorite character is, and they don't say Uncle Iroh, they're wrong. They're just wrong. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. Uncle Iroh is just amazing, sweet, devoted, supportive, and everything we ever want to see out of a father figure. However, for as great as Iroh is during Avatar the Last Airbender, there's still a lot about his life that we don't know. So I'm gonna try and fill in the gaps the absolute best that I can. What we know for sure about Iroh is that he was the firstborn son of Fire Lord Azulon, making Iroh first in line to be the next Fire Lord. But that never happens, and Iroh's brother Ozai claims the throne for himself instead. And in some ways that does make sense because Iroh's really lost a lot of that inner fire from within him. So without any heirs to carry on after Iroh passes away, it's just gonna go to Zuko and Azula anyways, so why fight it? But if we stop and break down this section of Iroh's life, there are some things we can piece together. For instance, obviously, Iroh had to be married at one point, and in the comic The Search, it's strongly implied that the Fire Nation relies heavily on arranged marriages that the sages recommend. We also know that Iroh's late son, Lu Tin, would have been alive by the time that Ozai got married, yet Iroh's wife is nowhere to be seen during that wedding ceremony, which means she was either chronically ill or she died at a fairly young age. And from what we can tell, Iroh has always had a really good personality. Every flashback that we've seen shows Iroh as a very loving, devoted father, and I assume he was as a husband as well. Which also means it's very strange that Iroh only had one child. You would think a man this likable would end up having 5 or 6 children just because he got along so well with his wife. And really, someone in the royal family would have extra pressure on them to have multiple children anyways, because that shows to your nation and the entire world the strength of your dynasty. So, since Iroh only had one child, we can kind of infer from that his wife died in childbirth. Maybe there was even a second child in progress and neither the mother or baby survived the labor. Now, I would imagine that a man as sensitive as Iroh would take the loss of his wife pretty hard. And the fact that Iroh never ends up getting remarried seems to suggest that he felt guilty about his wife's death. And that could make sense if Iroh was looking at the situation as he got her pregnant, so he caused her death. Or if it wasn't guilt, then Iroh just didn't know how to grieve. Grief would surely be a sign of weakness to the Fire Nation and not a feeling that was encouraged to express. So Iroh just internalized that suffering, and as a result, he never learned how to love another lady like that again. And you know, people who have hurt the worst tend to work the hardest to keep other people happy, which logically does track with Iroh's character. But that trauma of losing his wife, combined with Iroh's upbringing with Fire Nation values, which, you know, are pretty ruthless, is likely what set Iroh on his path to become the Dragon of the West. But even though Iroh has had a really questionable and mysterious past, he's always had a good heart. In Fire Nation culture, a person earns the title of dragon by physically killing an actual living dragon. And apparently Iroh's the last person in existence to get the dragon title because he killed the last dragon out there. So even though Iroh showed Azula that fire-breathing trick and said, that's how I became known as the Dragon of the West, he actually got that name by killing the last dragon. Well, supposedly at least. As we find out in season 3, Iroh doesn't harm any of the dragons, but he actually lies about them still existing to keep them safe. You know, nobody else is going to go out and try to kill dragons and earn the title of dragon if they already think all the dragons are dead. And Iroh never told anybody that he lied about that, not even Zuko, who he was closest to. But then Iroh went on to the Earth Kingdom and became this fierce warrior that so many people were horrified to face. So Iroh was able to channel his pain and rage and really focus it on the battlefield. But his only happiness in life now came from making his son Lu Tin smile, which prompted Iroh to keep pieces of his carefree and upbeat personality alive. Without Lu Tin, Iroh would have probably become a very angry, sullen type of person. But with Lu Tin alive, Iroh had to be sweet to his son and keep him close because that was all he had left in this world. It was his only path to peace. Unfortunately, though, that sort of selfishness is what got Lu Tin killed. Truly, it is very unheard of to have the next two people in line for the throne to be in the same war on the same battlefield at the same time. And although we don't know the exact details, we do know that Lu Tin died during the siege of Ba Sing Se, which caused Iroh to just fall apart and lose that mini war. It was the first and probably only fight he'd ever lost. Then, while Iroh's wounds are still fresh, Ozai jumps in and seizes the Fire Lord throne for himself. And I mean, sure, that's a jerk move and all, but with Iroh being so much significantly older than his brother, it really wasn't great odds that he was going to have another heir anyways. So Ozai was going to get that throne either way. It was just whether or not he was going to wait behind Iroh or jump in front of him. But Zuko becoming the Fire Lord someday was pretty much set in stone the minute that Lu Tin passed away. So being a logical man and knowing all of this, it does make sense that Iroh wouldn't come home and fight Ozai for the throne because Ozai was going to get it one way or another anyways. But what happened to Iroh after this little coup? We do know that he stays very involved with Fire Nation politics, but again, this is years after his loss at Ba Sing Se. I almost wonder if Iroh freed himself from an Earth Kingdom prison and then just wandered around the world incognito for a while. If we go back and look at season 2 of Avatar, where Zuko fakes his own death, Iroh seems to know exactly how to fit in with Earth Kingdom citizens without arousing any kind of suspicion. So maybe that's from experience. And if Iroh had wandered like this alone before, it would give him the opportunity to start understanding his alleged enemies. And it would kind of be the perfect timeline to join up with the White Lotus. This would also have to be the period of time where Iroh went to the spirit world. Oddly, in season 1, episode 20, Iroh directly states that he's been to the spirit world before, even though it's not exactly an easy place to get to. I mean, think about it, the portals at that time were still sealed, so you couldn't just walk right in like you could by the end of Korra. So Iroh must have traveled the world, learned, and grown as a person until he achieved spiritual enlightenment and could astral project into the spirit world, which would be where Iroh learned more about how his energy affects his environment and those around him. Which, if you haven't seen Korra, that's basically the same lesson he goes on to teach her decades later. So yeah, for all you Legend of Korra haters out there, there is canonical evidence that Iroh was already connected to the spirit world. They didn't just decide to plop Iroh in that series with no relative context to it. And I have a feeling that initially going to the spirit world was part of Iroh's grieving process. He went there looking for the souls of his wife and son, but only found these really strange creatures everywhere. And even though Iroh loved the spirits, he couldn't stay in the spirit world yet because he had gained a new perspective and had a new mission to fulfill. As a member of the White Lotus, Iroh had sworn to protect the Avatar, and the best way to do that was by changing the Fire Nation from within and stopping the 100-Year War. So Iroh finally decides to return home to the Fire Nation, likely telling his brother that he just escaped from a Ba Sing Se prison and would like to be a humble servant to the throne. Of course, Ozai could smell a rat there, but what can you do? With Iroh free and home, Ozai would have to play nice, or else Iroh, the war hero, could rally support to dethrone Ozai as an imposter king. So whether he liked it or not, Ozai had to make it seem like a happy little reunion and let Iroh become a close advisor for himself himself and the military. But if you notice, as soon as Zuko gets banished, Ozai takes that opportunity to cast out Iroh with him. That was no accident. The farther away that Iroh was from the Fire Nation, the safer Ozai's throne would be. Iroh's plan, though, was to watch over and influence Prince Zuko, and in doing so, ultimately guide the future of the Fire Nation. So becoming Zuko's banishment nanny was exactly what Iroh needed. And that pretty much brings us to the events of Avatar the Last Airbender. You all have watched the series, so I won't go over everything that Iroh's done, but believe me, if you haven't watched it, it is excellent. Go watch it now! But as far as the comic series, once Zuko takes the throne, Iroh decides that his mission has been fulfilled. So he finally gets to open that little tea shop in the Earth Kingdom, the Jasmine Dragon. And even though Zuko struggles, he wants to let his uncle have a peaceful life, so he doesn't want to bother Iroh for advice anymore. That does kind of lead Zuko to going crazy though, so when he decides to go look for his mother in the search, Zuko decides to call in Iroh to run the Fire Nation in his absence. So yeah, that vow of leaving Iroh alone for good lasts about a week. And then Iroh comes in and plays as Zuko's body double in Smoke and Shadow, and he also attends the opening of Yudao for Zuko because he wants to be alone with his mother coming back to the Fire Nation for the first time. Other than that, Iroh tends to keep to his tea shop in Ba Sing Se. Then at some unknown point, Iroh leaves his body forever to go off into the spirit world. He never returns to die like a normal person would. And apparently Zuko never knew that that happened to Iroh. He never knew what happened to him at all, in fact. Although I do find it curious that in Tales of Ba Sing Se, Iroh sings that tear-jerking song to a picture of his son where he says the words, "Until we can be together again." It is probably the saddest moment in the entire series. But if it was really Iroh's greatest wish to be with Lu Tin in the afterlife, then permanently moving to the spirit world does not seem like a good way to achieve that goal. It actually would keep them separated for all of eternity. And while I will recognize that spirit world Iroh may have been a poorly conceived plot device just to shove Iroh into the new series, that also doesn't have to be the only answer. I mean, sure, Iroh was the mega favorite, and he's obviously not going to live for another, 70 years beyond what he is in Avatar the Last Airbender. So even though, yeah, they might have wanted a way to shoehorn him in there, it seems like it was also thought about as part of a bigger narrative beforehand too. But if we think about why Lu Tin died, it basically boils down to because Iroh let him go to war. So to Iroh, the death of his son is 100% his fault. Iroh didn't protect his son as a father because he had filled his own head with the notion of Fire Nation glory and being undefeatable. Iroh drank his own Kool-Aid and paid the price for his mega hubris. So even though Iroh loved Lu Tin dearly, he didn't know how to face him in the afterlife or how to atone for getting him killed. Which means Iroh chose to transition himself to the spirit world because seeing his wife and son again really terrified him. He felt like he had caused their deaths, and he didn't know how to ever go about making that okay. And to be clear, the circumstances were not Iroh's fault, but that's not exactly how guilt works. So there you have it. For all intents and purposes, unless Iroh's spirit goes through the spirit world portal, he's gonna be a celestial being trapped in the spirit world, separated from his wife and son. And since Iroh was a wise man, it had to be a logical choice on his part, which does make Iroh's presence in the Legend of Korra all the more heartbreaking. It might not be reality, but theories are more fun. And you know, what's Ozai gonna do when his brother— oh, never mind, that's later. Pause. Click clack. Micmac. The Jasmine Dragon. So yeah, that vow of— so yeah. Well, family members, we're almost done, but I want to invite you to hang out with me in some other places. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as my own personal self. And I have a Facebook page too, but I mostly just post photos over there. And sometimes people say, "Hey McGann, I want to mail you something. How do I do that?" Easy. Just click the About tab on my channel page and my most current P.O. Box info will be right there. I also run another channel, The Family. It's really a hodgepodge channel where we might post anything. Oh yeah, and I also sell shirts and stickers and stuff with the Family and the Fangirl logos. If that is your cup of tea, I have a link in every description of every video. Finally, if you want to help out the Fangirl channel and make sure I'm putting out video essays for years to come, the best way you can help is by subscribing and watching more of my videos, whether they're new, old, whatever. Maybe even share one or two on social media, help spread the word. People who watch to the end of videos like you helps to tell the site, "Hey, this is a good video, we should recommend it to other people." So if you made it this far, leave me a comment of something like, "Hey, I made it to the end. Love ya. See you next time, family members. Bye."